All right, this is lesson 3 of module 2. We're still going to continue our discussion and exploration around countries and individuals that joined World War I, but we're going to dig in a little deeper today and take our attention from the countries to a specific group of individuals, specifically the British teenagers who flocked to the army after war was declared. You're going to read today The Teenage Soldiers of World War I. It's an article from the BBC that succinctly describes how and why boys joined the war, as well as the resulting impacts the war had on their lives. You're going to consider how the social pressures and resulting treatment of the boys reveal larger ideas about society at that time. So before we start, I want you in your notebook to write a journal entry based on this picture that you're seeing. So you're going to have to draw on some creativity, kind of maybe what you would think, but also maybe pull from what we've read so far, kind of so that you know what's going on. But I want you to choose one of the 6 boys, not the officer. I want you to choose one of them as if you were one of them, and I want you to write a brief journal entry from that individual's perspective, explaining where he is, how he got there, and what he's thinking or feeling. Right. If you will, open up your notebook. Hopefully this article's in your spiral notebook. If not, I've got it on a Google Doc for you. I want us to find the teenage soldiers of World War I. And a couple of things we're going to look at, and then we're going to dig in deeper, but we're going to definitely look at how the title and the subheadings help you understand what this article is about, and then what other elements of this article help you understand its content. Those questions will reappear, so if you didn't get them in your notebook or pause for it, that's okay. All right, the teenage soldiers of World War I, and then the caption underneath the picture is, as many as 250,000 boys under the age of 18 served in the British Army during World War I. Virgil Keane remembers the sacrifice they made. War confers many things on boys who pick up a weapon to fight. They learn the true meaning of fear. They test their own capacity for courage and the limits of human endurance, physical and mental. Some find that killing comes easily to them, too easily, and others recoil from acts of blood. But what unites all teenage warriors is the speed with which they are hurled into a place of maiming and death. Describing the training of a boy soldier in World War I, Wilfred Owen wrote in Arms and the Boy, "Let the boy try along this bayonet blade how cold steel is, and keen with hunger of blood, blue with all malice like a madman's flash, and thinly drawn with famishing for flesh. Lend him to stroke these blind, blunt bullet heads which long to muzzle in the heart of lads, or give him cartridge of fine zinc teeth, sharp with the sharpness of grief and death." From Homer's Iliad to the present day, the stories of boy soldiers evoke a particular sadness, resonant as they are of the destruction of youth and possibility. But at the outbreak of the Great War, there was nothing to suggest that the tens of thousands of boy volunteers were about to join a long-doomed procession. Nearly 250,000 teenagers would join the call to fight. The motives varied and often overlapped. Many were gripped by patriotic fervor, sought escape from grim conditions at home, or wanted adventure. Technically, the boys had to be 19 to fight, but the law did not prevent 14-year-olds and upwards from joining in droves. They responded to the Army's desperate need for troops, and recruiting sergeants were often less than scrupulous. It was obvious they weren't 19, says historian Richard Van Emden, but you'd have a queue of men going down the road. You're getting a bounty for everyone who joins up. Are you really going to argue the toss with a young lad who's enthusiastic, who's keen as mustard to go, who looks maybe pretty fit, pretty well? Let's take him. 15-year-old Cyril Jose was a 10-miner son from Cornwall. With the region suffering from heavy unemployment, the boy with a strong sense of adventure joined up. From his training camp, he wrote an excited letter to his sister. "Dearest Ivy, stand back. I've got my own rifle and bayonet. The bayonet's about 2 feet long from hilt to end of point. Must feel a bit rummy to run into one of them in a charge. Not arf. Goodbye, and God bless you, from your fit brother Cyril." Cyril survived the war, but the bloodshed he witnessed in France turned him into a vehement opponent of militarism for the rest of his life. In one letter home, he poured scorn on the British commander, Field Marshal Earl Haig. What brains Earl Douglas must have! Made me laugh when I read his dispatch. I attacked. Old women in England picturing Sir Doug in front of the British waves, brandishing his sword as Johnny in the trenches. Attack Johnny from 100 miles back. I'll get a job like that in the next war. Why did so many teenagers make it to the battlefield? Recruitment officers were paid 2 shillings and 6 pence for each new army recruit, and would often ignore any concerns they had about age. Many people at the start of the 20th century didn't have birth certificates, so it was easy to lie about how old you were. It was 5 feet 3 inches, with a minimum chest size of 34 inches. If you met these criteria, you were likely to be. Some young boys were scared of being called a coward and could not resist the pressure from society. Britain let 250,000 underage soldiers fight in World War I. The patriotic imperative at the outbreak of war was not confined to British-born boys. For the children of migrants, rallying to the flag was proof of loyalty to their new country. Abby Bevenstein was born in Russia-occupied Poland in 1898 and came to London when he was 3. In September 1914, Abby volunteered, changing his surname to the English Harris. Soon after his arrival in France, Abby discovered the wretched nature of trench warfare. He wrote home, "Dear Mother, I've been in the trenches 4 times and come out safe. We're down the trenches for 6 days, and then we get relieved for 6 days rest. Dear Mother, I do not like the trenches. We're going in again this week." For Abby, and many like him, the trenches meant cold and mud, wet clothes and rags, the smell of death, and the sight of mutilated flesh, long monotonous hours interrupted by terror. On 29th December 1915, Abby was caught in a German mine explosion. The enemy had tunneled under the trench where he was stationed. He was wounded and suffered what they then simply called shock. In today's military lexicon, it would be described as combat stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. By early spring, Abby was back on the front. On the 12th of February 1916, the Germans again attacked his position, this time with grenades. Suffering from shock, Abby wandered back and forth along the British lines. He was eventually arrested and charged with desertion. His last letter home is that of a boy who seems determined to underplay his situation, not to put stress on his mother at home. "Dear Mother, I'm in the trenches, and I was ill, so I went out, and they took me to the prison, and I'm in a bit of trouble now." The following month, Abby, then aged 17, became one of the 306 British soldiers executed during the Great War. Those who survived the trenches and came home brought memories that they retained the power to haunt until the end of their lives. St. John Battersby was 16 when he was severely wounded at the Battle of Somme in July 1916. Like all the teenaged officers, Lieutenant St. John Battersby had responsibilities far beyond his years, as his son Anthony recalls. "There's my dad, 16 years old, really in the war. He is responsible for 30-odd men, and his decisions may result in them dying or not dying. This was it." 3 months after he was wounded, St. John Battersby was back in France, leading men in battle again. He could have opted to stay at home. By now the government was taking all those under 19 years of age out of the front lines. But a shortage of experienced officers meant they were allowing boys like St. John Battersby to stay on if they wished. A sense of duty compelled St. John to return. Soon after coming back, he was blown up by a German shell and lost his left leg. Determined to continue helping the war effort, he asked for and was given an administrative job in Britain. But years later, after a fruitful life serving as a country vicar, the memories of war returned. His son Anthony remembered his father's last hours. And the hour or two before he died, he was on the Western Front yelling, "The Boche are coming! We're going over the top now!" Right down deep on the ground floor of his memory was the Western Front. The man facing death was once again the boy who had cheated it so many times.